Hi, it's John Buice with Keller Williams in Florida's Suncoast home. Today we're at iCard Merrill and going to talk to Natalie Coldiron about the pitfalls of the as-is contract here in Florida. We've got all that information for you and we'll be right back. So today we're going to talk to you about the pitfalls of the as-is contract here in Florida. With the market the way it is, we have all kinds of crazy offers being written on homes, and we wanted to talk to you about the things that Natalie sees on a regular basis, that what we call pitfalls of this contract. We want to be that, as I said, comprehensive resource for you with about real estate. So Natalie, I just want to go through the contract with you and have you explain to us some of the things that you've recently seen with these contracts and the crazy offers coming in, and have you explain it to us.
Sure. I review every single contract that crosses and comes through the door. So
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, Natalie's dad and her do 99% of the closings for my team, and they attend every single closing. It's amazing. That's one of the reasons I use them. I have the same paralegal, the same processor, and either Natalie or her dad reviewing all the contracts, so they're really great. So one of the things first things I wanted to talk about was closing dates. We're seeing a lot of cash offers, and people are putting some closing dates that are not good. So can you explain some of that?
Yes, I get asked often, how quickly can you close? Can you close in 2 weeks? It's a cash condo. The answer is possibly, but it's much safer to put on or before 30 days from whatever the effective date is going to be. There are certain items that hold up the closing date. Does the seller have a payoff? How long might the municipal lien and permit search take? Is there going to be a condo association approval, the estoppel? A survey, is a survey needed? Surveyors, appraisers, they're all backed up in the market right now. For a cash contract, I would say on or before 30 days is safe, and we'll close as soon as humanly possible. And when you're submitting an offer, sometimes the seller won't be ready to close in 2 or 3 weeks. So sometimes sellers are turning down quick closings because that's not enough time for them to get out.
Right. And when you say on or before, what does that mean to people?
When you're putting the date, you can write right next to it or before, so that it's on or before, for example, June 7. The parties would still both have to agree to move up the closing date, but when you're submitting the offer, it's letting the seller know that you're agreeable to closing early as long as everyone's ducks are in a row.
Right. Okay. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about, there's a place on the contract where it says you may not assign this contract or may assign this contract, but may not be released from liability. So what exactly does that mean?
Assignability under the contract, it gives the buyer the right to change how they want to take title to the property before the closing takes place. For example, if you've got a husband and wife listed as the buyer, then they speak to their estate planning attorney, and their estate planning attorney advises them to take title in the name of their trust, or maybe it'll be a rental property, so an entity like an LLC might protect them from liability against future tenants at the property. That box, may assign but not be released from liability, would allow them to do so.
Okay, I got you. And you mentioned there's a new sentence in that. It says if no box is checked.
Yes, this is new as of November of last year, and I keep seeing contracts where none of these boxes are checked. Well, FAR Bar, the Florida Bar and the Association of Realtors who created this contract, they've added a penalty. If you leave all of these boxes blank, then the buyer may not assign the contract prior to closing.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big mistake then. So I'm seeing a lot of cash offers come in, as I said, but after we have a signed contract, then the buyers are coming back and saying that they want to do some type of mortgage on the property. So what's some of the challenges there?
Well, many buyers are submitting cash offers because they feel like it's more likely to get accepted by a seller, but they still intend to get financing. That I've seen problems left and right. Buyers are wanting to take advantage of the great interest rates right now. But if that buyer does not have cash in hand at closing, then they will be in default under the terms of the contract. There are many things that can hold up this process that they're not thinking about beyond their credit and what may be sitting in their bank account. For example, what if the property doesn't appraise?
Right.
That could cause their loan to fall apart, where if they don't have cash in hand, the buyer will be in default. Or maybe the buyer's getting a line of credit on their existing primary residence. Many buyers don't realize that once you sign those line of credit documents, there's a 3-day right of rescission before those funds are available to them.
Wow.
They need to know that their money's not going to be available in time for closing. They have to time it right.
Wow. So, if they do decide to try to get even a partial mortgage, but they didn't qualify for that mortgage, then they still are responsible to pay cash.
Yes.
Gotcha.
They better have
Gotcha.
cash in hand at closing or they will be in default.
Right. I'm seeing a lot of these offers come in where the buyer is starting to pick up a lot of the costs at closing that are typically associated with the seller, like the doc stamps.
Yes.
And a few of the other things that are typically paid by the seller. Are you seeing any problems with that?
I'm not seeing any problems per se, but if the buyer's getting financing, make sure that the buyer checks with the lender to make sure that it won't be a problem on the financing side.
Okay.
I see buyers offering to pay for documentary stamp taxes on the deed. The pitfall is just knowing what that costs before you make that offer. $7 per 1,000 of the purchase price.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. So, next area I want to talk about is selecting the title agent, which would be you. I know when I'm working with a buyer, I always recommend that the buyer picks the title agent, you and your dad, to do the closing. But I always have people say, why? Why should I do that? So,
Yes, there's actually a map of Florida which lists out county by county what's customary as to who selects the closing agent and pays for the title insurance. It used to be the case that buyer picks and pays in Sarasota and then seller picks and pays in Manatee County. Well, that line has blurred.
Right.
Once COVID hit and the market took off, I'm only finding where seller picks and pays, or I'm sorry, where buyer picks and pays.
Right.
In this seller's market, the buyer's always paying for title insurance that I'm seeing.
Yeah. So when the buyer then picks the title agent, then they have the attorney representing them in the transaction?
Yes, here in Florida, you can either use a title company or an attorney, but we cost the same thing. So you might as well use an attorney.
Right.
We have no attorney's fees. It's just the title premium, which is regulated by statute. There's a statutory calculation for it. And then the closing charge. That's what should vary from title company to attorney.
Okay.
And we have no junk fees, wire transfer fees, file storage fees, document preparation.
Right. Right.
Nothing like that. So we cost the same.
So I always explain that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I always explain that to buyers to make sure that the seller has clear marketable title and
Correct.
everything is ready to go at closing.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. The next one I wanted to talk to you about was the special assessments, and there's a box on here that says seller shall pay installments due prior to closing, and the buyer does them or pays them after closing. Now, I just sat in a class with your dad, and I was completely wrong about this. This has to do with HOA fees in the community. Is that correct?
That's a huge misconception. The HOA fees and the condo fees are discussed in the addendums.
Okay.
These special assessments are only those levied by a public body, such as the Longboat Key Underground Utility Assessment or the Philippi Creek Septic Replacement Program.
Right.
That's what this discusses.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was completely wrong about that until your dad came to our
Huge
office.
misconception,
Yeah, absolutely. I was glad he cleared that up.
Yes.
Seller disclosure. So we always have these available for our buyers, but what's some things that people should be aware of in there that they, if they're just skimming through those documents? I mean, what's some things that you've seen people maybe miss in there or they're important?
On the seller's property disclosure statement,
Right.
many layman sellers feel that if they've repaired something or replaced something, there's no need to disclose it. For example, maybe there was a hurricane and the roof became damaged. They filed an insurance claim through their homeowner's insurance company, and the insurance company replaced the roof. Well, there's a database in homeowners insurance companies, and maybe that claim is now stuck with the property.
Yep.
If the seller didn't disclose this prior roof replacement and give the buyer the opportunity to look into this, that might be an issue when they go to get homeowners insurance.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Or a foundational crack.
Yeah.
If you were a buyer, would you want to know that there was a repair to a foundational crack in the house?
Right.
You would want to know that it was done correctly. Maybe there's a large tree and they patched it, but there are still roots that would continue to grow. If the seller doesn't disclose that, the buyer is left without an opportunity to investigate.
Right. So if they were under contract at one point, there was something discovered that the buyer and seller couldn't come to an agreement on. That contract went away. The seller went ahead and repaired that, then that would be something they would need to add to their seller disclosure, even though they filled out one.
My thought about that is your seller may tell you that it would scare off a buyer. So I fixed it, no need to disclose it. In my opinion, I don't think the buyer would be turned away just because something was fixed.
Right.
When the seller became aware of it and fixed it, it just shows good faith. The seller's laying it all out on the table. Here are the receipts. Here's the company I used. I think that shows good faith for the seller to go ahead and disclose it. It is what it is.
Right, right. Okay, the big one for me is the difference in the as-is contract as compared to the regular FAR/BAR contract.
Yes.
And these crazy inspection periods that they're putting in there. Now, number one that you and your dad have coached me on is the municipal lien search, that you have to have a certain amount of time for that, because they may say we'll do our inspections within 5 days, but we have to allow how many days for that municipal lien search?
Right. Most people don't know that your inspection period is also your deadline for your municipal lien and permit search.
Right.
And if you don't get that within your inspection period, then the contract states that unless buyer exercises the right to terminate within their inspection period, then buyers accepting the physical condition of the property and any violation of governmental, building, environmental, and safety codes, restrictions, or requirements. Your opportunity to object to those matters is your inspection period. Lien searches take anywhere between 5 and 15 days for return because they come from a governmental entity to get back to us.
Right.
Agents and buyers aren't knowing that when you're cutting short the inspection period, you're also cutting short your deadline to object to those matters.
Right, right. And then the part of the as-is contract, can you talk to us about it? It says buyer may terminate this contract during the inspection period, and that's basically for any reason.
For any reason whatsoever, in buyer's sole discretion. They can drive around the neighborhood, they don't like it anymore, they can walk for any reason whatsoever.
So it's not necessarily in the benefit of a seller to sell as is, because they're going to come off the market, they'll be in a pending sale status during this inspection period, so they're losing days on market, and then the people can show up, because we're seeing people come that haven't even seen the house.
Sight unseen, yes.
Then fly in from Michigan
Yeah.
and then actually physically see the house and go, oh, nope, we're out.
Right.
Right.
This is, I would say, most of the time, the preferred agreement, especially on behalf of the buyer, because buyer can cancel for any reason
Right.
whatsoever.
Right.
Recently, some agents feel that it's better to use the standard contract because the seller has an opportunity to lock the buyer in
Right.
by making all of the excess repairs.
Right.
But then agents aren't understanding what happens next. They know that seller can lock the buyer in, but they don't know that there's a sequence of events that must happen. And buyers, for some reason, are being told that if seller doesn't make all of the repairs, then buyer can walk.
Right.
That's not the case.
Not the
There's a
case.
huge list of exclusions
Right.
of items that seller has no obligation to repair or replace whatsoever.
Right.
And buyers aren't being competently advised as to what the standard contract means versus the as-is, where they can cancel for any reason whatsoever.
Gotcha. Okay, and the last one I wanted to talk to you about on as-is contracts. When I'm representing the seller, I'm still getting requests for repairs. So,
I know. Yeah.
I don't know, sometimes I don't know how to address that and go, no, it's as is, or, what do you advise on that?
FARBAR's true intention with the as-is contract was that it was supposed to be a free look. Buyer can come in, look at the property. If they don't like it, they can walk. FARBAR did not intend that the buyer would be using this contract to have all of the leverage to then ask for repairs.
Right.
But that's how it's being used.
Yeah.
They will hit you with a repair list, and if you won't do it, they'll walk away.
Yeah, they're going to cancel.
The buyer has all the leverage here.
Yeah, yeah. So I know you and I discussed this.
Yes.
I had a buyer buying one of my listings. He wanted to come in and he did his inspection.
Yep.
He did a self-inspection actually, and actually wanted to come in and do some repairs himself before closing.
Well, why would you repair a home that you don't own yet?
Exactly.
What if it doesn't close? You will have repaired someone else's home. Or, worse off, what if you make a repair and something goes wrong?
Right.
Your buyer may be subject to liability for having caused damage to the property that they don't own yet. I would never advise that a buyer make repairs or improve a home that they don't own title to yet.
Right. Yeah, in the case I had, I said, they wanted to get up in the attic. I said, wonder if somebody falls through and breaks their back.
Yes.
So who's responsible? And,
Home inspectors have insurance coverage for things like that.
Right.
Buyers do not.
right. That was just to keep this a little shorter than,
Sure.
We could go on for hours about
Yes,
this.
I could
but,
talk forever.
Is that most of the things that you've seen in the as-is contract, or is there some other glaring things that I didn't bring up?
Well, there's the buyer waiver of claims paragraph that most agents and buyers aren't aware of.
Right.
There's a paragraph that's in bold that nobody happens to notice, and it's called buyer waiver of claims. It says, buyer waives any claims against seller for any damages or defects pertaining to the physical condition of the property that may exist at closing and be subsequently discovered by buyer.
Right.
So if buyer doesn't discover a defect in the property, for example, they close in January, and then come June, July, August, when we get our daily torrential downpours,
Right.
let's say the roof starts leaking like a sieve.
Right.
I get the calls start rolling in that surely the seller knew about this. It's leaking in 10 different places. What are my rights? My first question is, did you use an as-is contract? Because you have waived your contractual right to sue the seller for any defects that are discovered post-closing.
Great.
You may have a claim for fraud, but that's much harder to prove than breach of contract.
Right.
It's the breach of contract claim that you've waived.
Great. Well, Natalie, we certainly appreciate your time going over this. As I said, we could sit here for 2
Yes.
hours covering this contract, but we wanted to give you some of the highlights of what people are doing, the contracts they're writing, and give you some advice on that. If there's any questions I can answer for you, I am not an attorney, and I'll have you call Natalie, but I'll certainly help you with the contract. So feel free to reach out to me at 941-962-7443. Thanks so much.